Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here. Today we're going to talk about the Ambassadors of Death, the version that is on the Season 7 box set, which, as you can see right here behind me. Now, first I'll talk about my thoughts on the restoration, and then I will talk about my thoughts on the story. The restoration work is improved over the DVD release. However, I'm going to be honest, it's still rough. This is nothing against Peter Crocker. There's only so much you can do with this material, and considering the time given, the fact he's pretty much doing them themselves, and the budget given, you can only do so many miracles. Now, to be fair, we're lucky to have it looking as good as we do. I mean, considering on VHS, most of Ambassadors of Death, I think, was in black and white. The DVD colorization looked very rough. The fact that we have managed to even get it to this point is saying something. So I appreciate all the work Peter put into it. But that being said, it is still noticeably a lot rougher than Episode 1. Episode 1, of course, is the original Video Master. The original, the oldest surviving Video Master in classic Doctor Who period, actually. And Episode 1 looks really, really good. And when you compare Episode 1 to the other episodes, it's night and day, especially in the location work. There's not a lot of location work in Episode 1 outside of the unit fight, which is fantastic. But what's there looks clear as a bell, whereas then the location work, especially in Episodes 2 through 6, looks rough. It has this gritty, grainy look to it. Sometimes movement does this weird stutter, blur, judder. I don't quite know the word for it, where it looks a little odd. And sometimes you get these random rainbow dots all over the screen. You've heard me talk about this in like Mind of Evil with the sky sometimes, where it just looks like lots of colored dots in there. You get some of this in some of the location work. Not always. Sometimes it handles it fairly decently. Sometimes very roughly. Like the first time when Regan or whatever his name is trying to kill the Doctor by changing the jet fuel. Some of the location work there looks really shoddy color-wise. The color just kind of does random things. The studio works better. The big improvement to me is, well, actually, let me say the biggest problem for me, especially in the studio shots, is the skin tones. Other than that, everything looks much better. The walls in the background, the floors, the clothes are much improved. Because sometimes, especially in Season 7, like in the DVD versions of Silurians and Ambassadors especially, the walls look a little weird. They look weird colors, or sometimes part of a wall looks slightly different colors than another part of the wall. And it's something that's always bugged me. And it doesn't do that much here. Really, only one scene stuck out at me where the walls were looking a little odd color-wise. One time when the Doctor and the Brigadier are having a talk. The Brigadier's behind a desk. The walls were doing something that kind of weird. But most of the time, they look really good. Outfits, sometimes clothes, like the spacesuits on the DVDs, to me at least, you can see the kind of dots of color. White jackets, lab coats, you can see it, not so much now. In the studio work, on the location work, still problematic. And motion is, again, much smoother in Episode 1 in the location work. The location work for Episode 1 looks clean. It has no gritty look to it, no film grain. It looks clean in Episode 1. When you see the unit vehicles driving up to the warehouse, the fight in the warehouse. I love that fight in the warehouse. I'm so glad that's in Episode 1. It's choreographed so well, and the camera work is done so well. It's a really great battle in the warehouse. And since we see it on the surviving episode, it looks really good. Whereas, say, in Episode 2, when the bad guys ambush the rocket landing thing and steal it, the module, that looks rough. And when it's being shot outside, because it is a recovered episode with the color recovery, it looks rough. And again, location work just feels like it's a couple generations down, which I'm sure it is. While I think it's shot and directed well, the whole time I was like, it just looks rough because of it not being the master. And of course, they probably do suffer from analog equipment. When you make a copy of a copy on analog equipment, you have a significant amount of generational degradation, basically. Unlike digital, where you can make a copy of a copy and they look the same, analog equipment, the copy is slightly inferior. They kind of use that principle in the movie Multiplicity. But in real life, if you're making copies of something, a copy of a copy is going to look a lot better than a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. You know, each generation down, you lose some fidelity there, if that's the word I'm looking for. It increasingly looks worse and worse and worse for each generation you get down in copies. So you may have some of that going on here too, because episode 1 looks the most sharpest. There are times where in episodes 2 through 7, not only do you have that kind of grit and grain, sometimes even in the studio shots, everything looks not quite pixelated sometimes, but where you don't have that fine detail. I noticed in some shots, you're very much looking at standard definition material, which I mean it all is, but I swear, comparing episode 1 to the other episodes is like comparing HD to SD. It just really is. Whereas in episode 1, everything just looks sharper, clearer, details stand out more. And again, the best way to ever tell when you watch Ambassadors of Death is watch episode 1, then watch episodes 2 through 7, then go back and watch episode 1 again immediately after. And the difference is just night and day. So watch 1, 2 through 7, and then watch episode 1 again. Big difference. Now again, I'm not trying to talk bad about Peter, because he's done the best he can with the available time and budget. And he does good work. But it's just interesting to me that I feel like the War Games in color looks better than the Ambassadors of Death in color. And it does. Even though the War Games wasn't originally filmed in color, that looks really good in color. Even the people who didn't like the War Games in color think it needed, have to admit the colorization part looks good. Now, it's not a fair comparison in Peter's defense, because the War Games in color had multiple people colorizing it. It was trimmed down to 90 minutes. And it had a bigger budget because it was going to be broadcast on television. I forget, BBC4? I forget. But it was actually done for broadcast. So it had a lot more budget, a lot more time probably, and a lot more people working on it. Whereas Peter has to do all 7 parts of the Ambassador. Well, excuse me, has to do 6 parts of the Ambassadors of Death by itself pretty much, with what I'm sure was a much lower budget. Now, could we actually get episodes 2 through 7 to look almost as good as episode 1? Is it possible? Probably, if you took the black and whites and colored them in from scratch like they did with the War Games, but you would have to have the time, the people, and the budget to do that. And I just don't think these box sets have that, especially for and maybe if they ever did a 90-minute or a 100-minute version of Ambassadors of Death on TV like they do with the War Games, maybe they could, but there's no way they're going to do that for a 7-parter that I think most people agree does not need to be a 7-parter. And Ambassadors of Death does not need to be a 7-parter. I'm not saying it needs to be a 4-parter, and I certainly don't think you could do it in 90 minutes. But I would have been all right with an omnibus of it. I think you could easily trim it down to 6 parts, easy. Maybe 5, 5.5. But there is some stuff in there that doesn't need to be in there. Liz escaping and getting recaught. The guy at the beginning taking so long to open the capsule, the doctor taking so long to get up there and get into the alien ship. There's stuff there you can trim. Now, the biggest problem is the skin tones, as I mentioned earlier. They look red in a lot of places. Like, people look red. They look like rock lobsters, red. And it's inconsistent. It's not like one person looks a certain shade of red the whole story. I mean, famously, the color recovery works at different levels on these episodes. Some look better than others, with, I think, episode 3 looking the worst. Most people would agree. Episode 6 looking pretty good, in my opinion, until the end, right around the cliffhanger, when the general's face just looks red again. There's a lot of red. The cliffhanger, I think it's of episode 3, when Carolyn John is running away, when she's driving Betsy and she runs away and nearly flips into the water. That still looks rough. Still looks rough. Looks better. Looks better. And it can't be easy dealing with all of either Carolyn's hair or the stuntman's wig there. Because there are a lot of times where it cuts to that close-up of Carolyn when she's looking. That had to be a nightmare to try to clean up, I'm sure. Especially with all of her hair. And especially, again, because the location work, sometimes movement looks a little wonky. And it especially does there with when Carolyn is looking back. And you can see her hair moving. The movement is a little choppy, janky, stuttery, blurry. I don't quite know the word I want there. But it doesn't look like fluid movement like it would have if it had been the original master. So that had to be a nightmare to color. But skin tone to me is what really hurts it. And I was watching that the whole time. It was kind of driving me crazy. Not in a pulling my hair out about it way, but just at a, I wish that looked better. And then sometimes the colorization, their eyes are the same color. You especially notice this with John, because he does have those kind of, I don't want to say bug eyes, but he has those big eyes. Where the eyes, instead of, his face being skin colored and his eyes being white, and you'd be able to see the blue there, his eyes look the same color as his face. You especially see that, to me at least, in that close-up of episode 2, when he's like, right, cut it open, that whole bit when he's talking at the end in the mic. His eyes look the same color as his face, and I just can't unsee those things. So it's the restoration is still a bit disappointing to me, because I thought Silurians was done pretty well. I think Inferno still looks really good, and I really like the location work. Because I know Peter redid the location work from scratch. And it looks much better, in my opinion, in Inferno. So it's just a little frustrating that Ambassadors, which we all knew was going to be the hardest one anyway, is still disappointing. And I think it's much more noticeable when you have episode 1 there, and you go from episode 1 to the rest of it. Especially if you go back and watch episode 1 right after. Because you see what we could have had. And it's a reminder just how much the junking policy hurts the Pertwee era, not just the Hartnell and Troughton era, even though they're the only two with currently actual missing episodes. But the fact that the junking policy, missing episode policy, does affect the Pertwee era strongly as well, because so many of his episodes, even though we have them, we don't have the original videotapes for them. And because of that, the others that have been recovered through various sources, a lot of them, like Ambassadors, look rougher. They don't look as good of a quality. And that's a shame, because they're good stories. Ambassadors of Death's a great story. Same thing with, say, the Daemons. You look at the surviving episode of the Daemons versus the other 4, and there is a difference in quality there that's very plain to see. You see that with the Claws of Axos as well. I'm rather surprised Planet of the Daleks episode 3 stands up so well, because that one I really think, especially the DVD, that is the odd occasion where I am utterly convinced the color restoration on the DVD is better than the color restoration on the Blu-ray. When I watch Planet of the Daleks, I'm watching episode 3 on the DVD. I just feel like it looks better than the Blu-ray, personally. And I'm convinced those are separate. Some people might try to say, isn't it the same colorization? I don't think so. I think the Blu-ray was a fresh recolorization, and I don't think it's as good. But the DVD of Planet of the Daleks, episode 3, looks great. Like, if you didn't know, you would know. It looks really good. Now, like I said, I hate like I sound so negative, but part of the whole reason of watching the story was to see the restoration, and I'm really big on being honest with you guys. I don't try to sugarcoat it. Again, I'm not blaming Peter. I feel like he did the best he could with what he had, with the time he had, with the budget he had, and the fact that it's basically just him doing it, and with the resources he had available, with the condition that the episodes 2 through 7 are in. And it's a miracle it looks as good as it does. So I really appreciate Peter doing what he could to get them looking as good as they do. Now, story-wise, I like Ambassadors of Death. It's too long, but I enjoy it. I think the cliffhangers are good. I tend to like the cliffhangers in it a lot. This is the one I think that introduced the sting. I like that. I love the intro with the Ambassadors of Death. I don't know if I quite like it playing after the recap. It throws me off every time, because it just wasn't done a lot. So it constantly was jarring me a little. but I like it. I like most of the cast. I love the guy who runs the Rocket Center, the one who's always talking to the people in the rocket. I like him. I think he's in Doctor Who somewhere else too. I think he's in another Doctor Who story. He's great. Really like that guy. He's a huge. He's definitely a strong reason why I like the story. The guy playing the general, who's kind of the bad guy, he's really good. The guy playing Sir James is okay. Not bowling me over, but he's fine. But the guy playing the general, though, he's good. I really like the one kind of foot soldier for the bad guys, who's only in episode 1 and 2, the one who kind of leads the assault on the warehouse, the one who surrenders to the Brigadier. He doesn't do a lot, but I like him. The one doctor that's working for them, the one that ends up trying to go to Unit for help. I feel bad for that poor guy. That sounds like a painful way to die, but I liked him. It's great seeing Benton joining. Benton doesn't have a lot to do. I think he's only in episodes 5 and 6. I can't remember if he's in 7 or not. Yeah, I think he is in 7. But it's great to see him kind of rejoining the Unit family, so to speak, because I know he's also in the Invasion. It's good to see him again. I don't really care for the Professor Cornish. No, what's his name? The professor with the accent and the beard. I just didn't like the accent. I thought it was a terrible accent. I just didn't much care for him. I mean, I didn't dislike him overly much other than the accent, but he was just kind of, to me. Also, the girl that's there kind of in the Space Center, the young black-headed girl that's only in like the first 2 episodes, doesn't strike me as the best actress. She has one time she's doing a line where I almost feel like she's fighting a yawn. Like as she's doing a line, she's kind of like, there's a bit where I almost feel like she's yawning. I kind of wonder if that's why she just kind of disappears after episode 2. They're like, yeah, get her out of here. She wasn't doing pretty to look at, but wasn't doing much for me. But I also love the fact that the story, it is friendly aliens. That the aliens aren't the antagonist. It's just a certain group of humans that are antagonists. But the fact that the guy kind of leading those humans, has good intentions. He thinks he's doing the right thing. And I like that when he tells the doctor at the end, I was doing my duty, you understand? And the doctor's like, yes, I understand. So I like that, although you still have the other bad guy with Regan or whatever, who, of course, is not so virtuous. But see, if you're a bad guy and you have good virtues, you got to watch about the people you hire. They might not be as virtuous. The alien makeup didn't do a lot for me. And the scene when he looks like he's talking through the Venetian blinds. Like, the fact that it's Venetian blinds is kind of weird. But the actual effect of the screen, the blue screen, looks pretty cool. And also when the astronauts are talking to Control and they're talking to him on that blue screen, it's a pretty neat effect for 1970. For 1970, classic, no-budget Doctor Who, that effect of the screen actually looks really good when it comes up. And I mean, I'm sure they're doing some CSO rotoscoping or something there, but it works. It looks really good. Interesting how in episode 1, because when the screen comes up, there's that little bar on the walkway that's in front of it. That actually looks pretty good in episode 1, whereas in the other episodes, it looks a little weirder, again, with the color recovery. Because the bars actually look more blue like the screen, whereas the bars look a bit better in episode 1. Just a little thing I noticed. But I find this one enjoyable because I like most of the cast. I like John and Liz in it a lot. I don't like that Liz... Well, then again, I mean, Liz gets captured, but I mean, she is constantly trying to escape and trying to undermine them and get a word out. I mean, she's doing the best she can with the resources available, and Carolyn plays that well. I love the bit when she tells the one guy, it's all right, I won't hurt you. I wish we'd gotten more of Liz. I really like Liz. Carolyn is such a great companion. She really was. I do think this is one of those you can't watch in a day, which is different than, say, Inferno, where I can watch Inferno in one sitting just fine. I love Inferno. Even at 7 parts, it's balanced so perfectly. I always want to move on to the next episode. Because with Inferno, I mean, I watched the behind the sofa version of it, then I watched the full version of it, and then I watched the omnibus version of it, all in less than a week. And I could go turn around and watch it again right now. I love Inferno. Ambassadors of Death, I cannot do that. Ambassadors of Death is kind of like the Daleks, where it needs to be viewed over several days. And I ended up watching it all in one day. Not all back to back, but I did watch. Well, wait a minute. I checked that. I watched episodes 1 and 2 yesterday, and then the rest of it today. So episodes 1 and 2 I watched last night, like right before I went to bed, and then I watched the rest of it throughout today. And it still feels too close together. Ambassadors of Death is one of those stories you need to watch like minimum over a 4-day period. Minimum. Maybe 1 or 2 episodes a day. Because it runs long in the tooth. It feels it's 7 parts. It really does. Because there is, unlike Inferno, where I don't feel like there's a lot of padding. You could argue there's padding, but I argue that padding doesn't feel like padding. I feel like it's necessary padding, if you want to call it padding at all. I don't really feel like Inferno has padding. But Ambassadors of Death definitely has padding that's padding. It's padding for the sake of padding. Unnecessary padding, other than the fact you got to get the episode that length to transmit, because it's got to be a 7-parter. I really would enjoy an omnibus of this story. So I, much like the Daleks, don't watch it all at once. Spread it out. If you watch it all in one sitting, or even all in one day, you might come away from this story not enjoying it as much. And I'll admit, I liked my watch through, but not as much as my last watch through when I first got the DVD. And part of it could be because I swear it's only been like a year or less than a year since I got the DVD and watched it. And Ambassadors of Death is just not a story I need to see twice in a year. It's one of those I can wait 3 or 4 years to watch again. Even though I enjoy it, it's just not like, say, Inferno, where I can watch it every week. And Silurians is like that too. I can't turn around and just watch Silurians a couple months after watching Silurians, other than that ending, which is phenomenal. Some Doctor Who stories, once I see them, I can't turn around and rewatch them. Empire of Death is like that, even though Empire of Death's just crap to begin with. But while Ambassadors of Death is good, it's not a story that I can just go through again. And keeping in mind that, again, my last watch through of it when I got the DVD wasn't overly long ago. And then I also saw the behind the sofa cut down of it. And so I was basically watching it yet again today in less than a 24-hour period. Watching the first 2 episodes late last night and the rest throughout today. And so it did affect my viewing experience of it. To where I didn't enjoy it as much as I did last time. I was watching it more because I wanted to see the restoration and because I wanted to get this video up. But I still like it. It's still a good story. It's just not a story I can watch every year. Like, say, Inferno. But I still enjoyed my watch through of it. So I want to know what you think of the Ambassadors of Death and the new Blu-ray restoration work if you've watched it yet. Comment down below and let's talk about it. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button as well. I also have a Patreon if you would like to support me on that. A link to my Amazon wish list is down there as well. A link to my Amazon UK wish list is also down there. I love getting fan mail. My P.O. box is down there as well if there's anything you'd like to send me. Wouldn't mind getting that new 3rd Doctor set with John Pertwee and the kind of chromed out 3rd Doctor Sonic. I don't have a 3rd Doctor Sonic, and I like that new head sculpt on the 3rd Doctor. If anyone wants to send that, I'll certainly take it. It's hard to get those kind of things over here in the U.S. without paying way too much money that I don't have at the moment. So if anyone wants to send that, feel free. I want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Colin Coney, Sam Venning, and Finn Perkins. I do appreciate their support, as I do the support of all of my patrons and my YouTube members. Very much appreciated. Most importantly, thank you for watching.